All right, for those of you who subscribed to my channel to learn what the first car I ever bought was, this video is for you. Honestly, I hit 100 subscribers sooner than I expected, which I guess is a good thing, but that also means that due to time constraints, this isn't going to quite be the video I had planned, but hopefully it's good enough for now. Before I get to the first car I ever bought, a brief history starting with the car I learned to drive in, and that is a 2002 Toyota Highlander V6 four-wheel drive. That was also the car that my parents let me take on my commute back and forth to high school as a junior. I'm the youngest in my family, so by the time I could drive, my parents were thrilled to no longer have to shuttle kids back and forth. I consider the Highlander kind of a jack of all trades, but master of none. The V6 meant it had an adequate amount of power. It was comfortable, got around 20 miles per gallon, certainly had enough space for anything you reasonably needed it to do. However, looking back on it, I literally couldn't tell you one feature, characteristic, etc., that I either loved or hated about the car. Certainly that isn't a bad thing if you just want to get from point A to point B comfortably, reliably, etc. But for a car enthusiast, it just wasn't that exciting. Fortunately for me, my sister graduated college at the end of my junior year of high school, and so my parents gave her the Highlander to keep as her own, which meant I got an upgrade for my senior year commute, and that was a 2006 Jeep Grand Cherokee four-wheel drive with the 5.7-liter Hemi engine. Obviously a huge step up in terms of power from the Highlander, but also a significant downgrade in fuel economy. I got in the mid-15s MPG. It also felt more tippy in the corners than the Highlander, which is saying something, but to an extent that actually made it more interesting to drive. Now, in college, I ended up going to school about 3 hours away from home, and there wasn't a good public transit option to get me back and forth. So I took temporary custody of my family's oldest vehicle, a 1999 GMC Suburban 1500 four-wheel drive. Looking back on it, I actually enjoyed my time with the Suburban more than the Highlander or Grand Cherokee, primarily because my parents really didn't care what happened to it. So it was my first experience with a quote beater car, and it was awesome. I could throw whatever I needed to in the back, all my stuff moving back and forth from the dorms, friends to go do whatever, sand, paint, mud, it all was fine. What was admittedly a bit painful was the fact that Suburbans of this generation had a 42-gallon fuel tank. While it got gas mileage similar to the Grand Cherokee, I could go over 600 miles without filling up. When I did have to fill up, it sometimes cost over $150 to fill up the tank, which was quite a dent in my cash flow as a college student. So anyway, after college graduation, it was time for me to buy my own car. My parents did give me the Grand Cherokee, but I knew it wasn't the car I really wanted long term. So what were kind of the requirements for what I was looking for? I actually learned to drive a manual transmission when I was 16 on a 2001 Audi TT convertible, and I wanted my first car to be a manual to kind of solidify my car enthusiast credentials. I also wanted something with all-wheel drive because I go skiing in the winter, and since it was intended to be my only car, I wanted it to be somewhat practical, and since I had only had SUVs leading up to this, I figured a wagon was the right choice, and quite honestly, that would also help reinforce my self-perception as a car enthusiast. Finally, my budget was $15,000 to $20,000. It was a little over a decade ago when I went through this selection process, and so the main ones in consideration were an Audi A4 or S4 Avant, a BMW 3 Series wagon, a Saab 92X Aero, Subaru Outback XT, Volvo V50, and a Volvo V70R. As I began test driving, there was one test drive that sealed the deal nearly immediately, and that was with an Audi S4 Avant. Unfortunately, that test drive was in an automatic, so I wasn't going to be buying that particular one. However, that started the nearly year-long search for a suitable vehicle. For those of you who don't know, these are pretty rare cars. There were less than 5,000 S4 Avants sold in the US from 2004 to 2008, with a fairly even split between manuals and automatics. But what that really means is that Audi sold as many B6 S4 Avant manuals over 4 years in the United States as Ford sells F-150 pickups in a single day, just to give you kind of an idea of scale. So to find my car, I had Auto Trader alerts on. I was constantly searching Craigslist. I did general Google searches to try and pick up ones that might have come up on various enthusiast forums. And then in June 2012, I came across a posting on a forum called Six Speed Online. And it was for a 2004 S4 Avant manual with 43,000 miles that was within driving distance and relatively close to my budget. After taking it for a test drive and a bit of haggling, I ended up bringing that car home. Now, why is this a questionable decision? I think any high-performance German car out of warranty is a bit of a gamble, and even more so for a relatively young professional who didn't have a bottomless wallet to maintain it perfectly. S4s of this generation also have a potentially catastrophic engine design flaw, and that is a timing chain located against the firewall. Audi intended for it to last the lifetime of the vehicle, but the guides they used for the timing chain were actually made of plastic, and plastic obviously doesn't always age well. So there have been quite a few S4s of this era that have been mechanically salvaged as a result of a timing chain guide failure, because that requires you to drop the whole engine, kind of do a rebuild and stuff like that. So that's where I'll pause the story for now. At 500 subscribers, I'll kind of do a proper video revealing what happened with my ownership with the S4 Avant, as well as what cars, yes, multiple, are currently in my driveway. If you've made it this far into the video, I'm genuinely curious to know what your first car was, so drop it in the comments, and thanks for watching.